Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you around the world. I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about a topic that could be the defining topic not only of the next decade, but of our lifetime, and that is the topic of sustainability. Today we'll be zeroing in on onboard sustainability and looking at what's been recently done and what's next for the industry as a whole. My name is Sarah Clott-Walsh, and I'm an airline veteran with over 30 years of experience in catering, product and service development, and end-to-end customer experience. I'm now an independent consultant focusing on sustainability. I'm also a member of the Hayward Partnership and a board member of the IFSA Foundation. We've all witnessed the extreme weather events of this summer, from major droughts, extreme heats, and fires in the Western USA as well as in Western Canada, extreme heat and fires in Southern Mediterranean and even in Siberia, to the torrential rains and storms causing unprecedented flooding in Western Europe and in China. Mother Nature is definitely upset. Climate change is hitting home in more than one way, and we can simply no longer ignore it. This fact is also reflected in the latest UN climate report that was just published last month, which clearly states how serious the problem really is, and that's much more serious than we all thought, and that urgent action is needed now. And although aviation accounts for only a small percentage of all CO2 emissions emitted in the atmosphere, about 2%, we all need to, both individually and collectively, do everything we can to mitigate the problem. Our industry was really starting to get quite serious about sustainability before the pandemic. Now that the worst is over, hopefully, and the industry is starting to slowly recover, it's time again to focus on ways in which we can all reinstate these good practices. But we can't deny that we have taken a step backwards, hopefully a temporary one, as a result of the need for low-touch solutions on board to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and keep our passengers safe and healthy. This has, however, increased the use of single-use plastics at a time when EU regulation is banning it, and non-EU companies are also adopting similar standpoints. We do have good reason to be optimistic, though. The pandemic has not slowed sustainability thinking, rather it has actually accelerated it. And now we need to look together as an industry to see how can we re-accelerate sustainability on board as well. To join me in this conversation today, I'm happy to welcome our expert panel for today's discussion, which includes 4 people who are extremely passionate about the topic of sustainability. Mel Berry, the Director of Customer Experience at Iberia, an airline with an impeccable record for its sustainability practices. Matt Crane, the founder of the Aviation Sustainability Forum, otherwise known as the ASF. Anne DeHowe, founder of In-Air Travel Experience, a boutique consulting firm specializing in curating customer experiences and environmental sustainability. Anne is also a partner with the Hayward Partnership and a member of the advisory board of the IAWMA, the International Aviation Waste Management Association. And last, but definitely not least, Ariane van Mancius, the owner of Now New Next, an independent consultancy and knowledge institute in food and packaging with a focus on sustainability. So welcome to you all panelists, and great to see you here today. I hope you're all doing well. I'd like to start the discussion with Mel, and so that we can get as first an airline viewpoint on sustainability. And Mel, I know that airlines in general are doing a lot of work recently in sustainability in terms of renewing their fleet, in terms of aviation sustainable fuel, and in terms of course, operational efficiencies. But I know there's also a lot of work being done on onboard services. Can you tell me a bit about what Iberia is currently doing, and what are some of your bigger challenges?
Yes, no problem, Sarah. Before COVID, we were really starting to make traction with our sustainability measures. We'd moved to offering paper straws instead of plastic cups, which we use in the millions. We'd removed plastic bags from headsets and pillows and blankets. And more recently, with the single-use plastic ban, we'd introduced new labelling on the plastic that we haven't been able to remove yet. But with COVID, the priority really has been to keep everyone safe. So we've had to revert backwards on some of our measures and introduce things like disinfectant wipes and face masks, which obviously are not very sustainable. So now our challenge really is to find the right time to start to put the focus back on sustainability without making our customers feel uncomfortable. And it's a really difficult time to measure. So we're really looking at doing a lot of market research to understand when that right time will be. The good news is that our customers really see sustainability as being a key thing. It's very important to them. So that's very encouraging.
That's great. And do you have any feeling now for the timing on that? When do you think IBERIA will start to reinstitute some of those sustainable measures?
We're already looking at some things. So we're working with other airlines in the IAG group about potentially moving back to having a paper band around the pillows and blankets. But it's a very difficult one to measure. So we're going to do some test flights to really understand how accepted it is within the market and with our customers.
Okay, very good. It'll be interesting to hear the results of those test flights.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, and I think one of the things that we've seen with sustainability initiatives, even pre-pandemic, is there some products were introduced, or maybe service concepts were introduced, where the customer really didn't accept it, or they kind of thought, oh, this looks kind of cheap in a way. And I think, as an industry, we really need to kind of redefine what is quality going forward. But I think it's going to be key getting passengers to kind of go with us on this journey. And how do you balance sustainability without damaging the customer experience?
That's a really great question, Sarah. For me, I don't think we can see them as two separate things. So our customer experience has to be sustainable. It's as simple as that. Well, I mean, as sustainable as it can be, given all the constraints that we have. So moving forward, new initiatives and designs will always have to take it into consideration. So we have to look at the materials we use, the weight of them. Do they add value? Are they appreciated by our customers? Is there a new way of doing things? And also, are they really truly sustainable? We have lots and lots of rules around the disposal of waste. So it's really difficult to really understand if they're sustainable solutions or not.
Right. No, I agree with that. And, I work with sustainability and I work a lot in the area of textiles. And there's always just a trade off between different materials. And, one is good for something, but then it has a negative implication here. So it's really trying to get to the root of what is really the best. And there's probably no best out there. It's just kind of what does the least damage at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Right. So, Mel, I know that you're also doing a lot in terms of food waste, and you've just recently introduced an interesting concept in regards to that. Can you tell us more about that and how that's going?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, traditionally, when we think about flying, it's seen as a time of decadence. It's the time to forget about your diet. So, our customers expect to have choice on board and they expect things to be available. Moving forward, digital solutions, I think, are going to be the key thing to help us manage that in the future. But in the short term, the pandemic has really allowed us to rethink things a little. It's given us some time to step back and to think. So at the moment, we're not offering traditional buy on board on our short and medium haul flights. And to replace it, we've launched a new pre-order service called Deliver Fly. And this has enabled us to totally eliminate food waste from our retail. Traditionally, at the end of every day, there's about 30% of the fresh products that are thrown away. They can't be reused because of food safety issues. And they're things like sandwiches, salads, things like that. But with this new service, we're able to offer fantastic products, really, really good, fresh products that you never usually see on board, but they're in sustainable packaging. And we've totally eliminated every bit of food waste associated with it at the same time. So that's something we're really proud of.
Yes, and you should be proud. That's an amazing initiative. Zero food waste on board. Great. So what do you see coming in the next 5 to 10 years or so, if you even look out that far? What's next?
Definitely, I'm not looking that far into the future right now. For me, the future is all about personalization and choice, and with sustainability being a real key player in our decision-making process. We'll definitely be working really closely with Matt and the Aviation Sustainability Forum and Anne and the IAWMA on really understanding if the solutions that we're working on can really be defined as truly sustainable.
Yes, and again, as we said, that's going to be the big question. Yeah, but it's a good challenge that we want to take up. And so, thanks very much, Mel, for your inputs. And I think, yes, you are going to continue to work on sustainability, and I think everyone else in the industry will. I think they have to. If they're not on board with it yet, they will be. And I think one of the key challenges will really be getting that customer acceptance again and kind of thinking about what is quality going forward and what is it the customers are looking for. And I think, the term in the future will be travel as usual with sustainability. We will get there someday, but it's going to take, again, a lot of bold and concerted efforts from airlines like Iberia to make that happen, and a lot of airlines and the industry coming together. So when we think about the industry coming together, I'd like to move forward with our next panelist, Matt, and talk a little bit about the Aviation Sustainability Forum. I know quite a bit because I've been a little bit involved in the background, but I think the audience at large may not know as much. So I think it'd be good, Matt, if you could just start up and tell us a bit about the Aviation Sustainability Forum. What are some of the projects you're working on, and what is your purpose and your goals there?
Thank you, thank you, Sarah. I think when listening to Mel, what you can hear is how individual airlines, where of course that's where the passenger touches the product, are embarking on their own initiatives to improve their sustainability and their environmental footprint. Whilst everybody is working individually, the Aviation Sustainability Forum is best thought of as a think tank, where we bring together stakeholders from right across the in-flight service supply chain, from packaging providers or substrate providers, converters, caterers, food manufacturers, the airlines themselves, and then down into airports and waste management, which is where the IAWMA valuably comes into this in working with us. And we're trying to move to a point whereby we get collective knowledge into the room and share that with a view to trying to come up with truly sustainable solutions end to end. So to give you an idea of the sort of projects we're working on, we think of this as it's very, very complicated. It's almost like a Rubik's Cube. And we're trying to actually take a problem at a time and demonstrate that by working collaboratively, we can solve that problem for the entire industry rather than as individuals. And that's the key, the work of the ASF. It's a collaborative approach. And I think sustainability pre-pandemic has largely been used, I think, particularly by airlines to try and create a competitive point of difference. And we're trying to actually encourage the industry to move from a position of competitive advantage to one of collaborative advantage, which is by joining ourselves together, we come up with enduring solutions for us all. And there are plenty of case studies out there in other markets where this has been incredibly successful. And the beauty of aviation is we're so well regulated in some ways, we know exactly what's going on board every commercial flight that goes out there. We have manifests for everything. Therefore, we should be in a better position to actually understand that better and standardize. So the types of projects that we're working on, again, just one at a time, incrementally trying to get better and better around this collaborative approach, is the first one we're tackling is trying to actually, for once and for all, understand when an airline and a caterer should use a rotable solution on a meal service, for example, versus a disposable, and to actually make that through case study published to the industry so that we can all use it and we can all actually put our data in and understand what we should be doing. And then secondly to that, if we do decide, or the stakeholders involved decide that a disposable solution should be used, what substrate should we be using to ensure that they are optimized end to end for their environmental impact? So they're sustainable at source and they're optimized for waste management at the back end. And it's by doing that we believe as well that we'll place pressure then on regulation through standardization for regulatory change. Because one thing that Mel will know, and all airlines know, you can to a degree be as sustainable as you want to be around what you're using, but waste regulation at the moment would indicate that if you've traveled across an international border for biohazard reasons, incineration or deep landfill is where that's going, which kind of negates a lot of the work that's happened upstream. And we have to, as an industry, come together to join that up. And that's where we believe, collaborative advantage is the way that we should play this now, if we want to actually come up with the changes that we're after.
Yes, and I totally agree with that. And I think, the word collaboration is probably the most common word that's heard together with the word sustainability. Anytime there's any discussion around sustainability, collaboration is somewhere in the sentence. So I totally agree with that. And I think particularly in our industry, it is very complex. We've talked about it. It's a global industry. There's a lot of complexity with every country having their own regulations. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons you're so focused on that. I think that it would be good, Matt, if you could also talk about your most recent studies that you're working on. Maybe also give us an idea of what's next. What can we expect from the ASF?
Yeah. So the way that we've been working is because of course we can't meet at the moment. So we've been encouraging all of our members to place data and their own research and information into a secure vault, and then have employed third-party research houses to analyze that, to start answering the questions that I've been talking around rotable versus disposable and the types of substrates that we should all be using. So we're at the stage at the moment where the preliminary report for that is now published, and in September, as the month we're in now, we'll be moving to phase 2 of that, which will actually get into the members being asked then to allow the researchers to visit their premises, to get involved with their teams, to actually complete the studies, to arrive at what are the most sustainable disposable solutions that we should be using from a economy meal tray perspective. So that's the stages that we're at. So we're trying to provide that collaborative environment whereby members can share data openly if that's what they want to do across the membership, or they can actually lock it down and say, no, this is proprietary, but I'm willing for the research house to see it and actually use it in a non-attributable way. And that's working really well because we do recognize that some of this data is sensitive, but we're finding a way through that. So I'm particularly encouraged, and I think the point you made, Sarah, at the beginning, the pandemic has added momentum. I think we all know that we have to do better, that we have to find a way of breaking some of these barriers down between ourselves so that we can just come together better. So that gives you an idea of where we are right now.
Okay, great. And on the topic of members, I think there's probably quite a few people in the audience that would be keen to get involved. What do they have to do to get involved or to become members? Or can you highlight that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And we welcome new members at any point in time. We're very open from that point of view. And the easiest way to do it is just jump onto our website and you'll find a joining page on there and just get in touch. We are, all of our work is published openly to the entire industry. As I mentioned before, it's for the industry. And members benefit by being involved in that group think right at the beginning. So part of what we're trying to do is just further everybody's knowledge around the challenges end to end that we have, rather than operating in the individual areas that we're all in.
Right.
And that's one of the advantages by getting involved.
Okay, excellent. And how is the work funded?
A great question. At the moment, the way that we're working now on the first projects, we recognise that the industry is financially constrained. It certainly is. It's not where it was in 2019, and we do approach the membership for funding, but we're also securing funding from government, non-government organisations for this first project. I think there's been a lot of false starts around the type of approach that the Aviation Sustainability Forum is taking. And we believe that we'll gain momentum by putting the first project through and then moving on to others. We're working very closely with our governing bodies, IATA, the ACI, catering organisations, to ensure that we've got their support around us. And they see and they want to see the Aviation Sustainability Forum and the work of IAWMA, which Anne will come on to in a moment, really providing them with the leverage and the support that they want, particularly into regulation change, because that's one of the fundamentals that we've got to try and get at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more now than ever, it's going to be challenging to get a shift in that international garbage regulation. When you think about COVID and spread of germs and disease, that will be a challenge. But again, I think one that we're all up to. And I think if we, again, work together, we'll make it happen. Thanks a lot for the clarity on that, Matt, on the ASF. And I really love the idea of the step-by-step approach and that kind of proof of concept to kind of gain trust and then scale up as you go. I think that's a great approach because, again, it's a huge topic and it can become mind-boggling if you try to do it all at once. So breaking it down into those digestible, bite-sized pieces, as I say, is a great way to go. So let's now turn to Anne and hear about the IAWMA. I think it's, have similar goals to the ASF, but a slightly different approach and maybe a slightly different focus. So Anne, if you can tell us about that organization and tell us a little bit about your purpose and some of the activities that you're currently working on or planning on.
Certainly, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining. So the IAWMA is a non-profit organization that was born after completing a global research study funded by the FAA and published in 2020. The research demonstrated the gaps are interfacing and already pointed out by Matt. There's a lack of standards and programs regarding waste management for domestic and international travel. There's a lack of targeted waste collection streams and advocacy surrounding international waste. And last but not least, there's also a lack of industry collaboration. The report is publicly available and can be downloaded from the website, iawma.org. It generated interest from exactly the stakeholders we are targeting, which are airlines, airports, but also governments, regulators, caterers, and product suppliers. In terms of purpose, so the purpose of the IAWMA is to share best practices to reduce and eventually eliminate solid waste resulting from air transport, and to support the industry to build back greener. So what's next on our agenda? We definitely want to continue offer stakeholders greenfield creativity and international knowledge of circularity best practices based on relevant projects. For example, and as Mel already pointed out as well, globally, aviation relies heavily on single-use plastics to mitigate carbon output and ensure pathogen protection. However, as governments begin implementing plastic bans, the industry can benefit from an advanced platform to aid adoption of a circular economy. And ultimately, and as Matt also mentioned before on the ASF, we aim to collaboratively try to move the needle on standardization, which of course is more long-term.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And And I think you're also very involved in kind of the overall customer experience and in alignment with environmental sustainability. What do you think are the first steps that the airline and the wider industry should take to reduce their in-flight waste?
Well, I think the first step to be taken is to move to an on-demand consumption model, allowing to only load on board the products that will actually be consumed, and resulting in both significant waste and waste reduction. This can be realized by digitizing the experience end-to-end and introducing innovative alternatives to complementary catering, such as pre-order, like Iberia is already doing. Secondly, and this was already mentioned as well, industry stakeholders should collaborate and work with regulators to simplify the in-flight service and to standardize the materials used, which can then generate opportunities for a circular ecosystem.
Okay, very good. I agree with you. I also think kind of that on-demand consumer model is the key going forward. And I think we've all certainly gotten used to kind of an on-demand retail model during the COVID time in terms of shopping online and doing everything online pretty much. So this is really a good time to make the shift on board as well. I think the mindset is there, and now we have to take advantage of that and bring that change forward as soon as possible. And I think that, yes, reducing waste is one thing. I don't know that we'll ever get down to zero waste, although Iberia has done that in their economy class for some flights. But in terms of absolute zero waste on board, probably not. And there's then certain ways to manage that waste once on board and once the flight is landed. Do you think, Anne, that recycling is always the best end goal?
Well, I think we are all increasingly aware that our planet's resources are not infinite and that our throwaway culture is harmful. And that is why I believe a move towards circular economy is the only way forward. In other words, we should make products last longer and recover materials or other benefits from them when they can't be fixed. However, it's important to place this idea of recycling in a proper context, and the waste hierarchy does this best. So if we can please bring up this one slide. Perfect, thank you. So the waste hierarchy indicates an order of preference of actions to reduce and manage waste. For instance, it places energy recovery below reducing waste, reuse, and recycling and composting, meaning those options should be considered first when managing waste. However, it places energy recovery above waste disposal, meaning that waste to energy is preferable to landfill.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's very clear. It's a great way to visualize that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
We've talked already a little bit about the global standards in terms of optimizing waste management, and I think that's a big focus of the IAWMA. How do you think such global standards can help increase onboard circularity, and what can be done to, I think, really create those standards concretely?
Right. Well, that's a great question, Sarah. Thank you. So I think the creation of standards can unlock collection and monetization barriers and deliver measurable environmental results. For example, having one material type of disposable cutlery would drive down costs, offer greater sustainability, and yield efficiency from collecting a single material type. Also, standardization could mitigate the industry from regulatory pressures of handling its waste, because waste composition would be predetermined. And today, policymakers mandate costly handling protocols to protect other sectors that depend on a pathogen-free environment, because we can't guarantee that aviation waste is devoid of pathogens. Standardizing materials means items could be identified and recaptured in a pathogen-free manner, rather than buried forever after only one use. However, unfortunately, the reality today is that airlines and airports currently focus on their own internal sustainability initiatives, and they operate independently of the rest of the supply and collection chains. And I think those silo strategies have a negative impact when considering local collection infrastructure, because the industry must adhere to local waste programs and national regulations. And through standards, airlines and airports could avoid costly waste management and policy constraints, and this way accelerate the transition to a circular economy.
Okay, great. It really is kind of a complex topic and is not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think it's great that companies like the IAWMA and the ASF are working on that. So thanks so much, Anne, for your insights on that, and look forward to hearing more from the IAWMA going forward. Now, let's move on to Arjan. And Arjan, I think you've got an interesting topic for us today. And I know we talked a little bit already about a recent book you read called Happy 2050. And you were very passionate about that. And I think we had a very inspiring conversation. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that book. What's kind of the main messages in there, and what is it that got you so excited about it?
Yeah, well, hello, everybody. Not so specifically airline specific in this case, but the lady who wrote this book, Babette Porcelein, who wrote before the book Hidden Impact, which means to look where the impact is and not to turn bottoms that are very small in respect of CO2, water, or so she already caught my attention at that moment. And I think 3-4 weeks ago, she released this book, unfortunately not yet available in English. It's called Happy 2050. What I like about the book is the title, Happy, because it's not so happy at the moment. Kabul is just taken by people, and the whole industry and all the weather conditions, what you already did in your introduction. The outlook is not that happy. And of course, airline aviation is a polluting industry. And she forecast a system change, how we can reach 2050 in a more happy way. And at this moment, we are, also because of the pandemic, we are giving a lot of money to prevention. It's also in the Netherlands, the flooding, it's the fire, and that's the problem, that if this occurs more and more, too much money goes to prevention instead of the actual business. And what she described in this book is that our system is based on the wrong pillars, growth, shareholder value, more and more and more, instead of a greener planet that we should take first into perspective and work from within the capacity, the Earth capacity of the planet. And with the outlook of 10 billion people, and that PwC prognosed a welfare of 2.7, we are here in 2050 with 20 billion consumers. And the word consumer is already not that nice, because somebody who consumes only takes. I will better call it citizens. And with that outlook, we really need to change to a circular economy. And a lot is already said, but this book caught me a lot because it needs a complete systemic change. And that's also needed within aviation. And because of the waste management and the protocols and the way of doing it, that's very hard because it's a very complex system. And we can swap to digitalization. The example of Iberia is great. You can swap to meat-free flights to become more sustainable, because that has absolutely an impact. We can move to other business models, but at the heart, this systemic change is needed in order to really make this industry more sustainable. And one of the predictions also in this book is that the polluter pays. We will go more to a system, because it's not. It's very hard to handle 2 billion consumers. We will grow into a system that we need to pay when we pollute. So taxes on fuel or airline and aviation, on products on board. We are very much that we get a meal on board and that we get service. That's very much into our system that we get this. But your convenience is very inconvenient for the planet. And that's what she describes, how to turn the whole system upside down so that we live in happiness. And for her, happiness is not about consuming and joy, but it's about safety and having enough to eat and to sleep but it's very sustainable lifestyle, and it's not going about joy and consuming, because that is automatically unsustainable. So there is a big shift needed in order to accomplish that.
Wow, that is super interesting. And, just the idea of responsible consumption is something I think that is really going to take every person on this earth to think about that and to change some behaviors on that. And, I hate to see that in terms of transportation being in the airline industry, but I think we all need to also kind of think about, why are we flying? How often do we fly? Where do we fly to? And it's an extremely valuable thing, travel, but I think it also has to be done in the right context of responsible consumption. And I also like the idea of the kind of the de-acceleration. I think we all need to just kind of take a step back, slow down a bit, and again, think about how we live and how can we live with with a lesser footprint and more joy in the world. So really some really interesting ideas there. And you mentioned a few about the onboard industry in terms of the Iberia's onboard on-demand concept, going vegan perhaps on board. Are there any other examples you've seen in the aviation industry of some systemic changes?
Yeah, also with British Airways, also they came up with the short-haul flights with not automatically giving something anymore, but you can pre-select what you like on board. KLM is already doing a lot with Fly Responsibly, but it all came to a little bit of a slowdown because of COVID. They had other priorities. You'll see that more and more. But I think it is after COVID, it's even higher on the agenda. So I believe that this will all come back. And they're looking in every single bit, if it's fuel, if it's a responsible consumption, if it's meat-free, also looking into pre-select, pre-order. That are all things that are easier to adapt and to include. But I totally agree also with Matt and Anne that the real solution is in working together and looking end of life and look how we are going to dispose our products and work back into innovation to create innovative services with the end of life in mind. Because we need to go to circular economies, and all this waste problem, because it is cut for waste, it will all be burned or in landfill. So we as an industry have absolutely a task to solve that it stays away from burning and landfill.
Right. Absolutely. And I think this idea of systemic change is a big one. And part of that has to do with, I think the material substrates and the way the waste is managed and how much waste we put on board to start. But again, I come back to kind of, I think, the customer side of this. And when we make such big changes and, we think about just, okay, what if an airline was a vegan airline? And I had a boss earlier at Swiss who back in maybe 2014, 2015, wanted us to become the world's first vegan airline. And I kind of said to him, are you crazy? The customers will never accept that. And we didn't go that route, but we ended up being the world's first allergy-friendly airline, which was also cool, but not really, to the extent of becoming vegan. And I think the world has shifted, and perhaps, there are some areas of the world that are ready for that. I've certainly made a shift personally, because now I would say, yes, let's go out and do it. There is such wonderful vegetarian, vegan food out there. There's a lot of top chefs that are going vegan with 3-star Michelin restaurants. Look at Daniel Humm in New York as an example. This is the future. And I think, again, we need to be bringing this on board, but not in the way we've done in the past. As you say, we've got to use innovation. We've got to use creativity. We've got to use quality in a different way to put together a fabulous product. Yes. Okay. I'm going to say.
I think, Sarah, if I may there. Sorry, Sarah, if I may there. I think what we also have, we're unique. We have a real opportunity within aviation, which is our passengers sit down and eat with us. So in other words, we don't hand them a product to take home. It's actually they're consuming with us. And I think we have a really, really good opportunity to educate and use that time that we have with them as well to better explain what we're doing and how we're contributing. And that I think if we were able to foster that in the right way, helps actually get further ahead with the types of change that you're talking about. In terms of meat-free flights or whatever else it would be.
Right.
So I think that's something that we can embrace really.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point, Matt. And I think that kind of awareness and education is going to be key going forward. Just as important as kind of labeling products, we need to go a bit further and really help to get our customers and passengers and guests to understand what we're doing and why, and hopefully they'll love it as much as we do. But that was really interesting, Ariane. Thanks a lot. And it's really nice to hear that happy 2050 and get a little bit more positive outlook, even though it will again be a challenge. It won't be easy. Systemic change is never easy, but it's a must going forward. So thanks a lot for those insights. And before we start to close, I have one final question for each of you. And I'll let you know what that is now. You can kind of think about how you want to answer that. But what one action would you like to see implemented right now? Just one. What would be the top of your list? Anne, can we start with you?
Sure, Sarah. And I think my answer is actually going to be quite in line with what Ariane just provided as insights on the Happy 2050. I would like to see every single body, whether it's a human or organizational body, a passenger, an airline or an airport, consume responsibly, from water, energy and resource conservation to minimizing food wastage. I think economical use not only protects the environment, it also is better for our pockets.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mel, what are your thoughts?
We've talked about it quite a lot already today, but for me, it's about changing the laws on the disposal of international food waste. It's one of our biggest challenges. We can have the most sustainable solutions, but when they've got to be incinerated, it's a really tough pill to swallow. So we really have to work with the governments around the world to find new solutions to this so that we can recycle and reuse worldwide.
Okay, great. Matt, what's on your wish list?
I'm going to burrow into a couple of threads, one from Ariane and one from Anne as well. And it's just trying to change our consciousness as individuals and people within the industry to the back end, to waste, and learn to love waste. We all just dismiss waste. Once it's left our tray or whatever, it's gone away. And learn to love waste and use that curiosity as to what happens to waste to encourage governments globally to join themselves up, because everybody is managing waste, whether it's domestic or aviation, largely in a different way. And until we learn to love waste and look after waste and respect waste and manage waste in the right way globally, that's a problem. I'd like to see that solved.
Yeah, me too. And I think I would even take that thought a step further and say, I think that we need to see waste as something valuable, as not just garbage, but actually something valuable that you can make other more valuable things from, or at least of equal value. And so great thought. And Ariane, again, last but definitely.
So a lot has been stolen. So consume within Earth capacity on, eliminate the laws and regulations, and embrace waste into valuable resources. Then I'll take, let me think, true pricing. We need to pay the real price for tickets. And for if we want to consume meat on board, you get a surplus. Now, if you order a tournedos and you want some foie gras on it, you have to pay 10 euros more. I would suggest to pay the real price of tickets and food on board, and you get a surplus. If you want to travel far away, you get a CO2 tax and a meat tax on board. So true pricing, the polluter pays.
Love that thought, and I know that's an idea that is already debated widely today. I'm quite sure it will come at some point in the future. Not quite sure how far off that will be, but that will certainly come. So I think listening to all of you throughout this panel and just hearing a little bit more about your wish list, I think it's really clear that we all do know what needs to be done for the industry in order for the industry to become more sustainable. I think the real challenge is going to be to get the industry to come together as a whole. And as Matt has said, again, to form this collaborative advantage as opposed to a competitive advantage, because we really can't do it on our own. We need each other to make this happen. And I'd also like to kind of reflect on something that the Apex Board of Governors said in their last meeting in May, kind of a similar statement where they said, we simply cannot compete on sustainability. We need to work together to scale up our efforts. And if we want to compete on something, let's just compete on our in-flight service or on our branding. But to make this work and to save our planet going forward and to make a contribution to further generations, we really need to come together and work on this. So I, for one, am certainly looking forward to see how the industry moves forward with this and how I can support it going forward, as this is really a big topic. So I think we're getting close to our final words. Is there anything else anyone on the panel would like to say? Any last thoughts or messages you'd like to give? No?
I just thank you for a good panel, Sarah, and I think we should be encouraged by the future. I think there is momentum, and I just with the industry listening, I just would encourage us all to grab it. The time is now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what Greta says, our little Greta Thunberg, she said, we cannot expect it from companies, we cannot expect it from governments. We need to change ourselves, and it starts with awareness. And if you're aware, you have to take action.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally agree. Great. Then a big thank you all to each of you. Thanks so much for your time and coming together on this panel. It's been great. And thanks for everyone out there joining in today. I hope you've enjoyed it and learned some new things. And I would like to also thank the WTCE and Onboard Hospitality for setting up this platform for us. I think it's great that we have the ability to come together as a panel and to discuss these topics. And I would just say to everyone, I wish you a great rest of your day and enjoy the WTCE. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.